Yeah, it's interesting because it's great to hear another guy say it because you're like, yeah, that's exactly what I'm going through. Or and it's and what's really nice and this is what I love about group coaching or having a group is that sometimes a guy and I keep referencing guys because I've really done most of my work both professionally and personally with guys, but equally with women's group. I ran a women's group for a year. Is that someone will say something that you're going through, and then you don't even have to speak. And so they'll articulate your problem, and you're like, I've just heard it. I'm going to go and solve it. And so that was great for a lot of guys because this is the reality for most leaders as well. Is the work that they need to do is the most repellent to them personally. Like for them to become this, you know, to get rid of being the bottleneck in their business, to get out of their own way, to disclose things that are holding them back. The thought of doing that is just so insurmountable. It's like, I don't want to talk about this stuff,
Mm.
but it's the very thing that they need. And I remember going into men's work. So the actual modality is called men's work, is where men get together and they support each other, they challenge each other, they guide each other. But I got in the space and I was like, this is a very repellent space. Like I went looking for groups of men to talk with, and I was like, I don't enjoy this. It was yoga pant wearing, anti-establishment, anti-money, wounded guys, and they weren't my guys. And like they were great guys, but there was a number of groups I went to. I was like, no, this is not it.
I get it. I
Yeah,
mean, I've seen like the church do it. They'll do like men's breakfast. I've seen the yoga pants ones. There's men in sheds. That's one that's like quite popular.
yeah,
And it's not just about the men's work. It's about men's work with men like you.
yeah. And it was so difficult to find that. And so I couldn't find it and I created it and which was great, but until the point where I realized that I couldn't talk openly and I was leading a men's group and I was like, I need to either leave the group because I need to go out and do my own stuff. And that's what it ended up being. I had two business partners, Joel, and then I talked about this on my podcast, is that I left that business because I was like, nah, I just want to be in part of a men's group now. I just want to be, a participant. But going back to the actual, it's repellent for a lot of guys, and what they see on the internet now is they see the kind of the Andy Elliott, the kind of the Wes Watsons, the real kind of rah rah, mass over.
I'm going to throw
Uh,
this out there. Andy Elliott can fuck off. Like,
it's just like
he is
it's
not for
so
me.
it's no, it's not for me, and like I can there's like, I take what I can I need from that kind of display, but
Yes. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
not for me. And then equally, there are these guys sending their buttholes in Bali, thinking that's men's work. And then when a lot of you guys who are in the middle, they're like, well, where do I fit in that? And that's what I've always been in the middle. I can go and have a good old session in the woods, and maybe go and take some plant medicine and enjoy myself and beat a drum. I love that. And equally, I can go and be hard in the gym and crush it and all that sort of stuff. But I don't need to constantly be on one of those polarities. So guys are probably looking for that sort of work and they're looking for that sort of help, but it's very confusing on where to find it.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think you can put yourself in those rooms, and it only takes one character to be like very alpha or very like cynical, and it can like seep through the rest of the room and like ruin it for you, where you're suddenly like, oh, you're driving there for your mastermind or your meeting, and you're like, this is the question I'm going to ask today, and I'm going to get this nailed. And it's like, it could be something really personal to you, like, oh, I've got a £70,000 VAT bill to pay, but I've got no means of paying it and I don't know who to tell. And then you get
I've been
there.
there as well. I'm
Yeah.
actually, have you been there? I've been
Well,
there.
cash flow is always fun, isn't it? It's always one.
Yeah.
But then you get there and like Captain Knobhead stands up with a question first, and he's like, "Oh, I just wish my dick was an inch longer." And you're like,
Mm.
"Oh, for Christ's sake!" Like,
Yeah, I think that, and that's the biggest problem I think that guys may have is it's like conscious guys, like like you said, you can really you're very good at articulating your emotions. You're very aware, and I think that's where I do think where money comes into it. Like normally when you've got guys who are doing quite well, and I'm not all that, I'm not going to generalize here, but when you've got especially a small leadership group like I'm doing with the Mile Deep, is that there's a certain level of a guy that can express himself in that way, that's got a handle on his money. And then what you find is the problems are very, very similar, or very,
Yeah.
similar shades of the same problem. And that's what I did notice, is that when I created my own, because it was, a good couple of grand to join, we had guys in a very similar part of their life. They were six figures trying to go seven, or they were high five figures, like 80, 90 grand, and they just had maybe hungry businesses and they needed to be more profitable. And that money, what's the word for it, filter helped really get the group in the right place. And I think that's a really, really important thing. There are free groups out there. You can get free coaching on, but at the same time, there is something about investing in a good coach, a good group, good therapy that does help you that so much more.
You have to have skin in the game. You have to
Yeah.
have skin in the game or it doesn't work. And like I've been there where I didn't have a pot to piss in and I needed help. And you have to find another way to invest in it. So it would be time invested. It would be,
Oh yeah, same with the ads. It's exactly the same thing. It's like I could go to a really, really inexpensive ad agency, or I could go to. All right, no, I wanted to find the best one, and then it just makes a difference, doesn't it? It's like
yeah,
it saved me so much time. So yeah, I definitely think it's such a big, but going back to the lead, like especially with like leadership, it's like a lot of people are going through enormous amounts of struggles as leaders,
yeah,
and they do it on their own. They don't even need to be in a group. We've talked, quite extensively about groups. Just having someone that will listen to you. Like, so one of my clients last 2 years ago, he owned two schools. So he ran two Montessori schools. Phenomenal guy, really, really great guy. And the different types of coaching for different clients. And he just needed to talk.
yeah,
And like, he would talk for 80% of the session, maybe 90, maybe even more. And I would just make one or two observations and he'd be like, that is gold. Thank you so much. And with that hour, it was massively transformational for him. Whereas other clients, I'll do a lot of psychoeducation. I'll talk a lot about, things that they need to learn. So it's really important to have that person in your life, whether it's a therapist, a counselor, a great coach. um, I think that's what a lot of leaders do need, and this is something I talk about quite a lot: is building your team. So I came from an elite sport background, and in an elite sports setting, you have a physio, a chiropractor, a massage therapist. You might even have a sports psych. You might even have a program director. You might have a lifting specialist. You've got a team, and there we are as leaders, and we've got like 60, maybe 50, 20, 10 staff, and we treat ourselves like, if it is to be, then it's up to me, and I do all my stuff myself. And I think that one of the things that if you're a leader listening to this is start treating yourself like an athlete and get your team. And like I've always had a team. I've always had coach, therapist, counselor. I go to Dr. Stretch, which is an amazing business. They kind of massage me and roll me about like a like Thai massage. Um, I've got a nutritionist. I've got all the team. I treat myself like an athlete. Do I have them all at once? No. Do I pay for them all in the same month? No, but they're all there helping me function to my best. And I think that going back, you mentioned before, Joel, like going from six to seven figures, I do see some of the seven-figure guys, they do have this figured out. They have their group that they make a commitment to. They have their group of friends that they connect with on an annual basis. They've got their therapist, got a great wife, and they've got their team. And so if there's anything I could say that would help you if you're listening to this and you're a leader, like who's your team?
yeah, yeah. I love that. I think I've said it before on the podcast, and you're describing it here. That journey from six figure to seven figures, you won't win the Premier League with a championship team. So that like six figure mentality of like we need one good player and a few half decent players. a couple of scraggly coaches and a physio, and we will just about get through this with some grind. That is not how the Premier League operates. Now, and I don't mean that in like an arrogant sense. I'm not saying that once you're a seven-figure business, you're Premier League, you're elite. It's just an analogy. But
Yeah.
the difference is like, and this analogy is getting tired now because the Championship's such a bloody big league that they've got all this stuff too. But it was a great analogy once upon a time. But
Yeah.
like sports psychology becomes really important at the elite level. There's a reason for that because the difference between scoring 1 in 3 shots and 2 in 3 shots is psychology, not ability. And like all these things that come into play that business owners can very often kind of say, "Oh, that's just a bit woo woo." Like I'm just going to work harder, and actually you can't. And I'm going through this journey at the moment. I've just taken over the business 100%. I've brought on an investor, which is a whole new different type of pressure. We're rapidly recruiting, and it dawned on me I need to be better. And I was looking at the where do I need to be better, and I looked at ability, and obviously you can always improve, but I looked at ability. I was like, no, I think the ability's there. Like I know my marketing game well. So I was like, right, leadership is like, how do I be a better leader? How do I sort of things? Like, no, I'm all right at that too. And actually, for me, where it was recovery. It was a big one. Like I'm shit at recovery, terrible, and I'm happy. Like, I'm happy to say that, and health and well being. So like one of my ongoing battles is food, and I like it's really dawning on me actually. Like part of my job is to get myself in the gym and get myself accountable to my own well being, and and then as a leader, I need to explain to the team why that's important. That why sometimes at lunchtime I'm going to the gym, and it's like a fascinating realization to be like, I I need to get myself to a place where actually to scale a seven-figure business, I need to be fit and well.
Yeah, I agree with you. And actually maybe it's the you'd get to the point where you don't even need to explain to the team you go into the gym. They just like know that you're such a high performer, you're so good, you're so present. They're like, I love being led by Joel because he's fit, he's healthy, he is his word. And I think that's what I actually had to exercise from my um explanation to my team why I wasn't on the gym floor, why I was like, actually, no, I'm doing this because it's so much more important for me to be doing this. And actually, this is something that it's the the distinction is becoming an operator to owner.
Yeah,
And a lot of the leaders I've worked with is they have an operator's mindset and they're becoming a leader, they're becoming an owner. And that jump is where you just talk about that, like things like thinking time. It was I always forget his name is Keith Cunningham. He was
yeah,
Dan Bradbury's coach. I was in Dan Bradbury's mastermind for 2 years. He's phenomenal, really, really good coach. And he talked about Keith Cunningham having thinking time, and he just had this thing like, when do you sit and think? And I was like, oh my God, I think that was like, I just fill my day, and that was a big, big step for me as an owner, as running the business like an owner. Whereas like the guilt I would feel just going and
oh, I
sitting
love
and
that you just said
yeah,
that. The guilt.
yeah, it was
I hoped you would
guilt.
say that.
Yeah, it was. I experienced it, and I think, but if we're sat there, we're taking time off, and we're feeling guilty, we're not going to be optimal. So even when we do have time off, and we are thinking about strategy and sitting there and just doing some hard thinking, if we're like filled with guilt, we're not going to be thinking optimally. So we've actually got to change your belief around going to the gym, sitting there before you do the thinking. Otherwise, it's not going to be optimal.
Yeah, like I'm not particularly woo woo. I'm pretty scientific in my thinking. Always have been really. I've got a little bit more open as I've got older, but recently I went to LA and San Diego for 9 days. I went to a conference and then
I saw. I thought I
I,
followed.
I,
I
I,
followed it all.
I banged on 4 days at the end for some me time basically, and we gained 11 clients in that period,
Yeah.
and that's no coincidence.
No way. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Yeah.
And I thought about it afterwards, and I looked at my notes because I'm like a heavy note taker. If I can't take notes, I'll voice note myself. That's just how I am. And I was like, some of the things I've come up with in this 9 days, there is no chance in hell I'd have come up with these if I was just operating the business. And then I've implemented just one of those things since I've got back, and I know it's going to be massive. And it's like historically, because I have this thing in my diary called flow time, which is a bit like thinking time. So I have an hour every morning, 9 till 10 flow time, where I'm meant to make myself a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, sit there, get my pen and paper out, look at my notes from yesterday, and just kind of ruminate on like what's going on. And I always chip into it. It always gets interrupted. I always chip into it, and it's the guilt. I'm like, oh, I should really do this, or I should really help with this. And sometimes it takes like 9 days in America to realize how important that time is.
Yeah, I I got taught, and this is something that you get taught in kind of real basic sports science, is stretch plus rest equals growth. And it's actually not stretch plus stress plus stress plus stress. It's stress plus rest equals growth. They're equal.
Yeah,
And like when you do, I know that the science behind it, and it's something called like super compensation theory. It's only in the rest where you jump back up. So it's really interesting that most people will just that they're like, oh man, I'm amazing at training. Most people are great at training. They can work hard in a gym. They'll work hard enough, but they're terrible at the 50% side of the equation, which is actually I would say the harder part, because it's seemingly it's not as well received by it's not as well received by society. Like it's like everyone's like, oh, he's crushing it. I'm like, oh no, I'm actually just taking 5 days off. Oh yeah, like and you hear people say it like, how are you doing? And they'll say busy, busy, because that's applauded by society. And
gross.
yeah, exactly. I was like,
Right.
oh no,
I used to I call it the bacon sandwich brigade. When you show up to a network club and you'd ask someone how's things. Now, if I said to you now how's things, you would probably give me a very honest and open answer because that's the character you are. The stereotypical business man, I would say, is man. How's things? Oh, real busy, thanks.
yeah, busy, busy.
All right. Well, you're meant to be busy. We're in business. It's in the fucking word. Like what? Like I don't
Yeah,
care. I want to know. I want to know what you're struggling with. I want to know what's like. I'm asking a serious question, and it's so
yeah,
throwaway. If someone like, and it's a good takeaway for the podcast. If someone asks you how you are, tell them they've
mm.
asked. Like, if they don't really want to know, they shouldn't have asked. So it's
Yeah, yeah. I totally get it. I'm very much the same, and then and I think that's what but going back to like most people, that's their language. That's where that's where they're going to. That's where they like most business owners. They'll go to something like a BNI meeting. They're really struggling, and then in a room full of people going, "Oh, everything's fine, everything's great," da, 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 da. And it's bullshit. It's like that. I very quickly got tired of that. And
yeah,
that's the problem, is that the social script in these places is that, oh, we're all doing really well, even though that no one's making any money, or some people are struggling, and everyone's masking it. And I grew very tired of that very, very quickly. And also is that the level of conversation is that I wanted to have it. You say it before that I got an MSc in science. I'm very woo now. That's just,
yeah.
it has
Oh,
to be science
give
backed
me your
woo.
best example of how woo you are.
Um, so what is like really interesting is like so recently I've been talking about inner critic,
Yeah,
and I talk a lot about motivational forces, where you derive your motivation from. And so motivation for me is where do we derive most of our motivation from to go and change? And most people come from fear. Now, the reason I
yes,
know this is that people would come into my consultation room, and they would be getting fit or losing a lot of weight because they were fearing being fat in a dress at the wedding. They were fearful that they didn't have enough confidence to date. They were fearful they'd never meet someone. They're fearful that they wouldn't have a baby. It was fear driven.
yeah, yeah,
And so the reason I know that, because we had a consultative process, and they would talk openly and easily. on the whole about all the things that they didn't want in their life. And I would say, what would you love? What would you desire? And there would be silence. And I saw that for,
It's a marketing ploy as well. That is that
yeah,
people will are more likely to move away from pain than they are toward desire.
exactly. And that's the most people are motivated by pain and fear, and which is great. And you actually need that. You need to sometimes you need the pain to get moving, but it won't keep you moving. And the motivational force that I think that people fail to move on to is love. Now, when I first really started getting into this, I really realized that I've always been able to train because I've come from a place of love. I love training. Like people
Mm.
that say, "Oh, doing that workout that I don't want to do." I don't have that. I'm like, sometimes I have to like what's the word for it? Like, I'm very unconsciously competent because I've always been like this. And I was like, why do I absolutely love training? I fucking love training because it's me time. I'm in the desert. It's the sun's on. I got a podcast on or something like that. I can't wait to get out of bed and it gives me energy for the rest of the day. I love training so much. It's not something I have to use any willpower to go and do. So I can use willpower doing the other things. And I don't think that people make that change. And that's what and so when I talk about woo, is like, that's one of the first things I help people, especially more recently, is like help them move from pain and fear driven transformation to love and desire. Like, really, who do you want to be? What do you love? And honestly, it makes life so much easier.
It's fascinating that you think that's woo.
Yeah, yeah.
That's my takeaway from everything you just
Yeah,
said.
yeah. I
You've
could
just
go
given the
deeper.
most
I bet
scientific answer to
yeah.
desire I've ever heard. I was hoping you were going to say like every day I do my tarot cards and that's
Oh
how I
no, no,
dictate my day.
that's yeah. I'm not I'm still like I had a reading, right? So
Yeah,
Poppy's like we're on the hour, Joel. Just want to make sure we good to keep going.
we're good. We started
Okay.
5 minutes late. Let's.
Yeah, just so the thing that I noticed is like, so my Poppy, my partner, like, go and get this reading, go and get this tarot reading. And I was like, nah, 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 nah. Anyway, I went on this call with this coach, and she read me like a book. And this was just before I left my previous business. I went on there and she just told me everything that was in my head. And I was like, what the fuck? I was like, I could not. She, nothing was on my Facebook about this. Nothing was on my Instagram. I was, and she said, this is what's going on. And she said everything I was thinking. And from that session, I left. The following day, I left my business, and I was like, that I don't understand that fully, but it was right, you know. So that was a big shift for me. Um, and how can someone so clearly articulate what's going on in your head?
Mm,
You know, so yeah, that was interesting.
that's wild. So, last sensible question, bar sort of before two big ones. Who are you looking for, and what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, so I'm looking to work with leaders of teams and people that see themselves as leaders. Now, you might see yourself as a leader if you lead your family. Like, I genuinely see that. If you want to be the best you can possibly be for your family, your small work team, or you've got an organization, I partner with you and I help you create commitments to being better in all areas of your life. And then what I help you do is as you exponentially grow in areas of leadership. And funny enough, and it's actually a recommendation if you're listening to the pod as well. If you've read 10x is easier than 2x by Dan Sullivan and Benjamin Hardy, they're both probably the best in the industry at what they do. I read that book and I was like, oh my gosh, I've been doing this with people for years, like helping them go 10x, and it is actually easier than 2x. Like,
Mm.
and we read the book because it'll kind of explain that. So I just immediately left and my old business and set up this new company where I actually help people operationalize that thinking. It's like, I want to go 10x. I want to be, 10 times the impact or income or freedom that I've got right now. And I've created ways of helping people do that. And that's what I'm seeing is like so many leaders get to the point of being the ultimate operator of their business, but to be the owner, that's the 10x leap, as Gay Hendricks talks about, the big leap. and that's where you've got to do less and better. And
Yeah,
that's my sweet spot. I'm really, really good at helping people do less and better and be more effective because in that space, it's not about doing more. It's about doing really effective things that move the needle. And it's like getting out your own way and putting your foot on the gas at the same time. So that's my sweet spot. So if you're listening to this and that's what you're looking for help with, feel free to get in touch.
love that. And what's the best way to get in touch?
I've actually got a website for the first time in my life. I did 15 years without a website. Joel, I don't know if you're going to be shaking your head or what about this, but I did 15 years without a website because it was all word of mouth. So coachbenjaminowen.com, or I just hang out on Instagram now, Coach Benjamin Owen. Yeah,
Nice, that's easy.
yeah.
So, second to last question. What's the best mistake you've ever made?
The best mistake I've ever made. Wow. I have made a lot of mistakes. Yeah. The best mistake I've ever made. Wow. Was getting married first time.
Oh,
I,
no one's
I,
ever said that.
yeah, that was a mistake. I married the wrong woman. Um, and it unearthed everything that I'm so grateful for now. She was an amazing person. I don't have any hate for her anymore. That took a lot, but yeah, I got married, and the fact I got married and went through the struggle of not being married and everything that taught me so much about me, my life, my business, my leadership, everything. So, yeah, that was probably the best mistake.
Mega, mega. I really appreciate you sharing that because I think that will ring true for a lot of people. And finally, and I promise this one's a bit gentler.
Oh,
What's
it's all right. Yeah, it's good. That's a
what's
great
your fa
question. That's a great question. That's like, yeah.
what's your favorite film and why?
Oh no. Really interesting in Billy Elliot.
Oh, wicked.
If you've seen Billy Elliot, if you haven't, what have you been doing? My dad marched me out of the ballet place my mum took me to as a young boy. And like it's got so much in that story about the father figure, the boy, masculinity, being a ballet dancer, and I
Tell you what, though,
cry.
if you look at adult ballet dancing men,
Yeah.
they're as masculine as you can get. Like
Yeah, and like my mum had this idea that she wanted me to be athletic, and so she took me to ballet. And my
yeah, yeah,
dad was furious and marched me down to the rugby club. So like it was, but yeah, I love that film for everything it stands for young boys, and like I really look at that as it's just a great film. So that's probably one of the many I watch. I'm a film watcher, so yeah.
nice. Ben, you've been a legend. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, bro.